Okay. Um, so, as an aside, I had recorded quite a few videos on our next topic, and then realized as I was going through to edit them um, that I had forgotten to turn my microphone on when I was switching between video sources because I have this new tablet. So instead of Microsoft Painting You, um, I'm going to be making very childlike drawings on a tablet screen. I don't know if you probably prefer Paint, but it's easier for me to do this. It um, feels more modern. Okay, so and the bright side of that is I realized after watching quite a few of those that I probably wasn't going about teaching you the like how to think about an AI in a different styles of games in the right way, and even like it was much too advanced, I think, too quickly. So um, in these, I think about maybe 3 videos we'll do, perhaps 2. I'll see. Uh, Talk about kind of what I within the context of our game, um, what I'm thinking about. So currently, just in our sandbox, we've got a player in here, and then we've got a variety of well, not a variety. We've got one style of pickup that the player can pick up, and the more of those that they pick up in currently at least, we've implemented a gameplay mechanic where their walk speed slows down proportionally to the number of calories, quote unquote, or particularly in this case, it's a float value. So we have that, and that's working, and it's increasing our score. We have a heads-up display and all of those kind of cool things. So what I wanted to do now is introduce an AI, and I want to have it be as kind of at least the framework to be as flexible as possible, because we don't yet know. We've play tested with players and our game mechanic and figured out, well, this is something that seems like it's going to work or could work, but we haven't done anything around having some sort of like motivating force, I suppose you could say, in the world that's forcing players to do this as maybe as more efficiently as possible or as quick as possible. We could add a timer or something and say when the timer reaches 0, then that's it, and we could put many of these tacos around the level, and that's also totally fine and probably a very fun game. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking we're going to modify our sandbox map, add a pillar here. That's a top-down view. And then we're going to add an enemy behind that pillar. And the reason I think we want to do that is to implement some very simple AI. So if the player moves here, then we want the enemy to see the player and then give chase. Same thing if the player moves on the other side. So really there's this kind of no-go area. And just to make it a little more interesting, I think we can also kind of have a danger zone, like a radius within which the enemy can or cannot see. So some sight radius that it has, and if the player is outside of that sight radius, and outside of like line of sight, the field of view, if you will, of the enemy, maybe it's like really good peripheral vision, so it's 90 degrees here, then the enemy can't see the player and the enemy won't give chase. Okay, so I think that's going to be our first goal here, and in doing so, I think we'll set up the framework for lots of different types of AI. So this is one particular AI. Maybe we'll call it Chaser or something. And then we'll make, over the next couple videos, we'll make some variations of that and some advances on it. So in Unreal Engine, what I want you to do is let's make a new folder underneath our content browser here, and let's call it I don't really want enemy because that automatically locks us into calling something an enemy, even though we will. Let's call it non-player characters, NPCs for short. Okay. So now that we have this, if you remember our gameplay framework, what we have set up so far is we've got a player controller. Let's look in here. Yeah, so we have a player controller, and that controller controls this character. And if you recall, we also spoke about controllers can control AI. And an AI can be a pawn or any of its descendants. In the case of us as a player, we're a descendant of the pawn, which is the character. So let's right click here in the NPCs folder, choose blueprint class. How about pawn, right? Because we're going to want to make our AI pawn. So let's choose pawn, and let's go ahead and name this BP underscore bad dude. I was going to say dudette, but I just am lazy. I don't want to type it. So bad dude. So that's our pawn. We also need a player controller. Sorry, an AI controller. So blueprint class. Let's see. It's not in our long list or short list here. So let's go ahead and AI controller. It's right there. And then inheriting from AI controllers, a couple other ones that I've heard people enjoy using, like this one, Detour Crowd AI controller, has some built-in behavior. So if you have many, many, many enemies, they'll all kind of figure out the best way to get around each other. So you can have hundreds of these, and they'll all like communicate with each other and say, okay, you're going to go this way, I'm going to go that way. And so it's actually kind of neat. But we are not interested right now because we're only going to have one. So select AI controller, and in this case, you would think, well, let's name it BP bad dude controller or something. I don't want to do that because we can actually have multiple AI controllers for the different types of AI that we build. And so this is what's kind of cool, is we can put the logic of each controller inside of itself, and then have it control, then have different types of pawns inhabit, if you will, or use those different controllers. So it's another way for us to keep things kind of relatively encapsulated, if you will, so that we have more flexibility. So in this case, I'm going to name it BP AI Chase Controller. Great. Okay, and then let's save. Okay, let's go into the Chase Controller here. And close it, sorry. That's not actually what we want immediately. Let's set up our pawn. So the first thing we need to do is set up our pawn to use this controller class, the one that we just created. So on the right-hand side here is from AI controller class. We want to choose BP AI Chase Controller. So choose that. Auto possess AI. Placed in world, spawned. Placed in world or spawned. Let's do this too. So this basically, what this is telling us is, will it auto possess, or will the AI auto possess it, and when will that happen? And normally placed in world, which is what we kind of tend to do, we just drag and drop something there, and then that's going to mean the AI will possess it. The AI controller, it will be possessed by the AI controller. I like to change it to placed in world or spawned, just because it gives us this option later on if we want to programmatically spawn one of these enemies. You know, if the player does something, it's like, imagine you have like a particular AI controller that's like a boss AI or something, and you want, if they pick up the final taco, you want this thing to, you want the thing to spawn and then start doing something. So that's kind of how we can make sure that would happen. Okay, let's compile. And while we're in here, I already know that we're going to want to move around, or the AI wants to move around. So right now there's nothing, well, there's a couple of things. There's nothing to see. So the AI has no visual representation. So I want to change that. And so far I'm like, using a cube for tacos. I'm using like a castle for the player, so I'm going to choose a sphere for the AI for now. That's fine. And another thing we need inside of the pawn is we need a way for it to move. So if you recall with the player, we had inherited this character movement. Like if we take a look in the BP, player BP, we have this character movement component that's inherited here that allows us to do things like walk and move around and handles a lot of stuff for us related to movement. So we want something similar for our bad dude. And so if we type in movement, we're going to add a component here. We have a few things. Wheeled movement, floating pawn, interpretive movement. This thing's, okay, great. So floating pawn movement is kind of what we have. You notice we don't have character movement, and that comes with the, if we had chosen this, a character type of pawn, we would have that. So, but the floating pawn movement, if we select it, still has some stuff, like it has max speed and acceleration and turning boost and has some movement capabilities. And so it's not as, I guess, full-featured as the character movement component, but it still is useful for our purposes. But if you had an AI that was a humanoid character that you wanted to be able to, you know, move and behave kind of similar to the way the player's character was moving and behaving, then you could not use this pawn. You could actually have selected a character when you created this thing. So I think for now that should be all we need. I mean, I already kind of see max speed feels very high to me, so we'll see when we get this done. Okay, so we can go ahead and close this. Now what do we want to do? I think we should change our map. And I kind of think we don't need these walls anymore, at least in our particular case. And this is too small of a kind of a play field for us, so I'm going to go ahead and make this 2000 by 2000. Excellent. I'm also going to put the player here. It's fine. We can keep our taco there. Actually, let's play this and grab it, as I have a feeling something's going to happen. Yeah. Okay. So I can't move anymore. You know what I can do? So this was another nice side effect of exposing this float value that we're using to calculate how much to reduce the player movement. Is we can just set this to 0, and then I think I should just be able to grab it and still be fine, and my score still goes up. So in a worst case scenario, you know, that you may find as you're playtesting it that mechanic is just not working at all, no matter what you kind of try to do. And you can just set it to 0 and it's, you know, just chalk it up to a learning experience. Hoping that's not the case when we're done, but we'll see. Okay, and the other thing I'm going to do is geometry box. Make this like 400 by 400. Fine. Okay. So there's our little bit of covered for the player. And then let's go ahead in our NPCs and we can toss our bad dude here. Let's move him up. And yeah, he's guarding this taco, or he will be. Okay, so that's, I think, that's our setup, right? So we would come over, we'd grab this, and then, right. And so in doing that, let's do this one more time. The player could have the option of maybe coming around him and then grabbing it like that, and then the AI here won't see it, won't give chase, or they just go straight for it. You know, this way they're seen here and it starts chasing them. So that's what we want to do. Okay, so with everything kind of set up, well, not at all. We need to add something that's actually quite important And we can even go into a lot of depth around how this particular feature of the engine works. But we need to add a way for this AI to know, where can it go on our, on our mesh or our level here. So right now, it really, as a player, you have some perception of, okay, I can, I now get the control scheme. I can go forward. I can go back. I know that I can move here. If I don't want to, if I go over this edge, it's probably not a good thing. I'm going to fall, right? So the AI needs something similar, like where can I go? Or, if I told you go to the other side of this pillar, since you know the control scheme, you can navigate around that. The AI cannot, or at least it's not as smart. So it needs a way to kind of get some sense of its environment. And Unreal Engine has something called a nav mesh that helps with that. So if you just type nav in modes here, you see something called nav mesh bounds volume. We want to drag one of these into our level. And this is just an empty volume. So it's represented here by a wireframe cube. And we want to expand this any way you want. You can either expand it just through using the widget or gizmo thing here, or you can expand it, I think, right here in the brush settings. And so I could have chosen to, it doesn't really matter, 111. Oh, it's locked. Whatever, doesn't matter. What matters is that it covers, or it encapsulates the geometry that you want to be able to generate a navigation mesh for. And so what we've done here is, may not seem like a lot, but what we've done here is, let's turn this on. So if you go to Show, Navigation, or you can press the P key, it will show you in green what, for this particular navigation mesh, green will be the areas that it says, oh, you can navigate on this, or this is navigable terrain. And you notice we don't have the top of this this column here selected. If we did want that top to be navigable for some reason, we could just expand this up, and now you see that we have this area is also green. And you may want to turn up, just P is what's toggling these things, right? Great. And so for now, I'm going to, nobody's going up on there. Great. So you have to have a navigation mesh in order to have an AI that's going to move around, unless you want to kind of programmatically do the movement through blueprints or something, which is just not recommended. So with that done, and as an aside also, if you want to change certain kind of detailed properties of the navigation mesh, there's something called Recast Nav Mesh Default that just comes along for the ride when you drag and drop one. So in your world outliner, if you select that details panel, you get things like cell height or agent radius or agent max height, and all sorts of other kind of variables that you can use if you find that your AI is kind of not behaving in the way that you would like when it's trying to move around some terrain. I mean, a flat plane like this, no worries. But sometimes there's just elements like stairs and things where you might want to have, I think there's one that's like stair height or something in here. Max step height, right? You could change that and make it shorter if you had really short stairs or something. I mean, sorry, really tall stairs that you wanted it to be able to navigate up. Okay, so with that done, we still have no logic to let this AI know whether or not a player is within its field of vision or not. So what I want to do for that is, because we're going to add all our logic inside of the AI controller, let's open that. And sometimes you get this screen here, which is just the class settings. Open full blueprint editor, and we are there. Path following component it got, and it has this actions component. It's very cool. Just as an aside, in the next video, we're going to do a path follower. So that will just teach you how to have an AI just kind of go along a path. Okay, so What we do need, though, in this chase controller is go to Add Component. We want to add AI Perception. So underneath AI, there's a few things here that you can add. Pond sensing is an older version of version of what we're going to use. It would get the job done in our case, but we want to choose AI Perception because that's something that Unreal Engine developers are going to continue to add different features and things to. So let's be modern here. So if you choose AI Perception, and then we can select that here, and we need to set up a couple things related to our senses. Our sense in this case, if we look over here on the right, is empty. So we want to add an element of sense here, and that element in our case is going to be sight. So you choose AI sight config, and then expand this out, and then we should expand it again, and we have all of our various sundry options that we can implement here. Sight radius, lose sight radius, peripheral vision. Those are like the three major ones. Another one, detection by affiliation. Because we're not programming C++, we need to also select detect neutrals here because the player is going to be detected as a neutral player, and there's no way outside of us doing a little bit of C++ programming that we may get to, but probably not. There's no way for us to set that flag, so at least currently. Dominant sense we can forget about because we only have one. And let's go ahead and compile that. So with that done, I think it's important to show you one other thing, which is pretty important. And that is how to debug this. Because right now, if we look in our AI perception, that sight radius and lose sight radius feels big to me, 3,000, given that we only have a 2,000 unit plane here. But I just have no idea, right? And so there's actually ways within the engine that you can debug or get more information. For most of the time, we've just been like printing out strings and things like that, but there's actually some pretty cool AI debug features that people have implemented here. So in order to turn those on, though, we need to go to Show, Developer, and I've already checked my AI debug, but what it'll look like for you guys is like Show, Developer, and then this is unchecked. So you want to check AI debug, and then Simulate. And if we simulate here, the first thing you're going to see is under, your AI should have this little devil horn icon here. I don't know why they immediately assume AI is bad. And then players, you don't know. He's neutral. Like, that's that green one. It's like, is it bad or is it good? Anyway, that said, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you see Clear Debug AI, Show Flag to Close. Use numpad to toggle categories. Number pad is what's on your keyboard, like on the far right, that you probably never use. At least I never do. Well, I'm going to do it now. So what do we get? 0 nav mesh. That's not doing anything. 1 AI. 3 EQS, which stands for Environmental Query System. That's quite advanced, so we're not going to cover it. But if you're curious, it essentially lets the AI query its environment and figure out, what's around it, meaning, or what types of properties are there, and it can use that to, like, figure out a good place to hide, or maybe depending on maybe different things, like that you want to grab something that's way far away, that it's outside of its perception and things like that, and then do other stuff. So we can ignore that. But we don't want to ignore 4. So if you hit 4, that's perception. And then select this, and then you get a bunch of information here about its perception and also its AI. So it's like different category, like, because we have that selected here. If I press 1, that goes away. Right, so the AI category, the controller name, the pawn name, its task. We haven't given it any tasks. We'll do that later. And then perception. So sight is green, range is green, and then range out, which is the lose sight radius, is pink. And so if we kind of zoom out here, it's got a very very wide and far perception here. So this green is the point at which it would gain perception, for at least for anything that's neutral, which would be the player. So provided it's within the 90 degrees vision. And one other thing I think I want us to add really quickly. That's going to help us because this is a sphere, so go ahead and stop this. It's a sphere. We have no idea which way is forward. I'd like to know that. And I'd like to know it when we're playtesting it. Definitely feel like I want to know it when we're playtesting it too. So I was going to add an arrow component, which would allow us to see, when we had it placed in the editor, we would see which direction is forward, which is the plus X here. But I think when we're playing it, we wouldn't see the arrow. So I actually want, when we're playing it, I want to see something that's indicating to us that it's facing a certain direction. So for that, I'm going to go make a cube. Press R. So I'm adding, I had the sphere selected. I went to add component and then cube. I'm going to hit R and then scale this down somewhat. It's not going to be the best. Let's change our scaling options. Make it a little smaller. Okay. And then make it smaller there. W. Oh my gosh. This is like, where's my sphere? I don't see my sphere. Because it's like getting smaller. Yeah, I see. Okay. Okay. So let's I want to make my sphere a 1 by 1 by 1 again. And my cube, I'm going to make small, like 0.25, 0.25, 0.25. Okay, there we go. It wouldn't have looked very good if we did that. And then, okay. Great, and then compile that. And let's just go ahead and make sure. Okay, perfect. All right, so this is the forward direction. Okay, so now we're back. Let's go ahead and simulate again. And I'll just finish up if you press 4. Finish up on this. So, okay, so we see now that its perception is 90 degrees, which is this little green line here. This is how it's facing forward. That's perception is way too far, right? We can already tell that it's going to see the player no matter what, and we want it to be able to, have some room to sneak around it. So let's go ahead and stop that. Go into the chase controller here and choose AI perception. Let's bring this down to say 200 and then lose sight radius. So lose sight radius is that point once it's seen the player. If you get out of that radius or the player moves out past this particular radius, then it's like I don't see you anymore. So if we do 250, and we should be able to then select this, simulate, press 4, and it's too small. So you can already see how this is probably quite a helpful tool for you, especially when you're starting to build and debug your AI here. So 200 is too small, 500, and then maybe 580. I should have really tested this beforehand, but I don't know. It shouldn't be too hard. Okay. One more time. 800, and maybe 900. Okay. And simulate. Yes. Okay. I mean, that feels more natural to me anyway, that the player could, you can sneak around. And it's hard to see here, but you could sneak around this direction. What if we go to top perception? I don't even see my, that's weird. I don't see my floor here. It's like there's no outline of it. Okay, whatever. I mean, we get it. All right. And we now know how to debug this, so it's not like going to be a very big surprise to us. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is we said we wanted to give chase when the AI sees the player, because it's called this chase controller. So we need to implement that. It's actually not going to be as difficult as you probably think, but first we need to, with the AI perception component selected, here in the events in the lower right, this is another way to add events that are pertinent to the particular component that they're associated with. And in this case, we want one called on perception updated. And so this event, if we click plus, this event will fire whenever the AI perception component is updated. And in this particular case, it would be updated when, because we implemented this site configuration, it would be updated when it detects something within the site radius that is of type enemy or neutral, so the player. And then it'll get updated. And once it's updated, it outputs an array of actors. So that would be our player character would be one of the actors that it's going to output, along with whatever, if it was a multiplayer game, a bunch of other people's player controllers, or if it's there's other other kind of enemies or around it, then and it sees those and it happens to have that flag set, or friendlies, it's going to output those too, and then we can do something with that. So what I think we want to do first is, since it's an array, we can get a copy of the first item, which is item 0, because we know it's going to be the player. So this will return a reference to the player, and then in the usual fashion, we're going to print a string, and we'll just be a little lazy but not too lazy and just output what the display name is here. Now let's compile that, and I can actually go ahead and play. Now, what do we think is going to happen? I think if I get in within that site radius, it should see a message that should tell us what the name of our player controller is. Yes, perfect. BP player character. Sorry, what our player character is. That's the object, right? And you can see each time it's getting a sense event, it's going to output that. See, so we got within its site radius. Blah blah blah. And if we go around here, because we know that there's I think there's a way around on this side. Yeah, we don't get anything until there. So we were within its site radius here, and it caught us. I think yeah. So let's just make sure we're getting this properly here. Yeah, so we were right here in the corner, and it saw us. Okay, very cool. So now we've got a way to say, hey, I saw the player. Now, what we can do is, instead of just printing out this string, we should be able to call, I'll do it from here, the move to actor, which is AI navigation. Okay, so move to actor. And because the controller is possessing this bad dude pawn that we have, we should just be able to say self, right? And then the goal should be a actor object reference, and the goal is the whatever it saw, right? Whatever it sensed. The very first thing it sensed is going to be its goal. It's going to move to that actor. Acceptance radius is -1. So finish move if pawn gets close enough. -1 sounds like it's going to basically want to clip us. It's going to want to go through us. If acceptance radius was a little bit larger, like 10 or something, then once it got within 10 units, it would say, I'm done. I'm going to finish this. Use pathfinding is navigation data, so we definitely want to do that. Otherwise, it will go in a straight line. So if we didn't have a navigation mesh, or if we unselected use pathfinding, then it's just going to say, okay, I'm going to go directly in this one direction. I'm not going to know anything about I know nothing about the obstacles that might be in my way, and I'm going to just go straight for it. Otherwise, it'll go straight for it if it can, given the paths that are available to it. So compile, sandbox, I'm going to save all. Okay, so if we play this, what do we think is going to happen? Well, I think what's going to happen is maybe not good. It's actually more Oh my gosh, I'm a little nervous. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, so it just goes right for the, yeah, it just goes right for the player very quickly. Okay, another thing we should do is yeah, that's going to get annoying, so let's go ahead and remove that print string. You know, we haven't done this in a while. I'm going to comment this. When we see the player, even though when we see whatever's the first item in the array, give chase forever. That's not what we want, but that's what's going to happen. And then another thing, since we have in our bad dude pawn, we have this floating pawn movement. Remember I mentioned I thought 1200 was too fast. I believe it. I think 400, and then acceleration maybe is 100. So it takes it, you know, 4 ticks to get up to its maximum speed. So this is the other benefit of having this floating pawn movement, is we have so many cool things we can change without having to do any blueprint stuff or any coding or anything. We can just immediately go to play, and then try to get that taco without him getting to us. Yeah, that's better. And then grab it, and then I'm just kind of running because I think, yeah, this is, there's nothing you can do. It will path to the player forever until it gets within a -1 acceptance radius, which means until it hits us, right? Done. Cool. Okay, so that's it for this first video, because it may have seemed like a lot, but pretty much what we've done, just to recap, is we created an AI controller. Specifically, we gave it some perception. That perception is then, you know, outputting to a node that says just move to an actor. That actor being whatever the first thing the perception was able to perceive. In this case, the player. We created a pawn, gave it a floating pawn movement component, and we said, go ahead and use an AI controller class of the chase controller that we created, and also auto-possess that, whether or not we spawn it or place it in the world. We learned about how to debug AI, and so that's just a matter of going to show and then developer, checking the AI debug, and then with that particular AI selected, you can press 4 and then see the various types of messages that you might want to be interested in, or its site radius in the case of it having this sense config of site. What else did we do? We added a navigation mesh, very simple nav mesh bounds volume. There's a lot of other things you can do with nav mesh bounds, and I think maybe I can show you very, very quickly that they're not just places you can go. You can also add a modifier volume, which will allow you to say places you cannot go, or places that might be, so if we add, I just added a nav modifier volume here, and I'm choosing nav area null, and if I press P, you now see that it's not, you know, there's no green there. So this area happens to be not accessible. So this is a modifier volume that you can add on top of the nav mesh, and maybe I do that. Right, and just to show you what this will do is if I play, I can still, it doesn't affect the player at all, but it's going to affect the AI. So if I go past here, I'm now safe because the AI is unable to find a way around. But the second I get within, you know, its navigable area, it will pick me back up, and you can see it's trying to get around, but it just can't do it. Sorry, guy. So that's a modifier volume. And then in addition, you can create your own. You can actually create your own. I mean, there's some that are like obstacle, which represents a high cost area. And so if you do obstacle as one, this could just be one where the AI is like, well, it's very high cost for me to get through there. So let's say we have this area is an area of high cost. And if I play this, and I go ahead and let's go on this side, he might actually path around. Yeah, see? So it's very high cost for him. So he'll come around the other way to get me. And if I go this way, he'll do the same thing. So you can use these, you can, actually it's kind of cool, you can use nav modifier volumes like this to like kind of help your AI. If your AI is doing weird stuff in a map, you can actually use some nav mesh bounds volumes to perhaps like force them to not do certain things. You're like, why are you doing that? So you can add a high cost area, or you can simply just set the area class to null, or obstacle. Obstacle is high, yeah, null. Null would be can't go there. Right, so, and don't delete that. And so let's go ahead and delete that. Okay, so in the next video, I want to add a couple of extra just like tweaks to this, this particular controller class, and then we'll call it done. I mean, that tweak is, I'd like it to turn towards the player, because right now it just doesn't feel like, that's just kind of really weird. Like it's randomly, it's not facing me. And that's just something I feel like we can do really rapidly and then get that controller done. And then we'll also build, from there, I think what we'll do is we'll build a pathfinding controller next. Okay, thank you.